Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Breckland Planning for today. Could I first of all go through what we class as our general housekeeping? Fire exits, there are two quite clearly marked on this side of the room. There is another one down the end of the corridor where the lavatories are, and of course the main door that you came into the building to start with. Could I now ask you to please, actually I have to do the same myself because I'd forgotten. Could you please switch off your mobile phones, or at least turn them on to silent? If they do go off in the middle of my meeting, you will be fined £10, which goes to the chairman's charity. And it's not me as the chairman of this committee, it's the chairman of the full council, which is Councillor Mike Nairn. And I know one of his chosen charities is Papyrus, which is the same as the Three Dads Walking. So a very, very good charity. And the second one is Mind. I must make a note of this. I do it every single meeting. So yes, your £10 that I will fine you will go to a very worthy cause. And I might even let you keep ringing your phone, but every time it does, it's going to be another tenner. But you'll have a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling when you go home. A procedure, as each item is called, I have a list of people who have registered to speak, and I will call them. And I will ask you to come and sit on my right-hand side here. The seats are quite clearly marked, but sit wherever you wish. The officer will give a presentation. I will then give you your lead time for you to speak. And when your time is up, you will hear, which is not for your room is ready for you to go to bed, but I want you to be quiet. I'd ask you to just sum up the end of your sentence. If your sentence goes on for another 15 minutes, I will shut your microphone off because I have the power of the main mic, which is a wonderful thing to have. Introductions, if I can introduce my team for the day. On my left-hand side, I have Mike Horn, who is solicitor to the council. Rebecca Collins, my right-hand person, my rock. On her right-hand side is Richard Fisher, who I'm not sure if you've all met him before, but he's our trees and countrysides officer. We also have Chris Hobson, Matthew Blackie, and I believe Lisa O'Donovan will be joining us a little bit later. So that's that. Good. Okay. On to our agenda for today. Item. Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes, that's what comes in right down. Before we go, Julie Britton, who is how could I forget after all the forgetful things that have been happening today? Julie Britton, our committee manager, who's taken care of everything for us today. And of course, at the back, Becky Harris, who has recently starred on Radio 2. Yes, you have, so don't ignore it, which I can give you all the details to later in the day. I don't know why she's gone bright red. Anyway, getting back to sensible things. On my agenda, item number 1 is to confirm the minutes held on the meeting on the 14th of February. Can I sign those off as done? Good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Julie. Item 2, apologies and substitutes. Do we have any at all, Julie?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Chairman. We have an apology from Councillor Bowes and Councillor Keith Martin, and Councillor Brame is in attendance as Councillor Bowes' substitute.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Brame, for sitting in. Very kind of you. So my next item is declarations of interest and representations received. We will take them as each item is raised. Item 4, Chairman's announcements. A couple of things here to do. Just to remind members that the next meeting of this committee is to be held in Thetford at the Carnegie Rooms for the 18th of April. I need when one member short for our chairman's panel on the 26th of April. So could you all search your diaries and let me know as the day proceeds, please, so we can fill that vacancy. And the panel for the 22nd of March will be starting at 9:30 instead of 10. I'm not sure who's on that panel, but 2 of you. Oh, you are, Keith. You've probably been made aware, but this is just a reminder to bring you up to speed with that. Yeah, you do have problems, don't you? Yeah, I think Wotton is probably a black spot for the internet. Either you didn't put enough money in the meter. Item 5, we have requests to defer applications included in this agenda. Do we have any at all, please, Rebecca? Thank you.
Yes, please, Chairman. We request to defer the 3 Litcham applications, which are 10C, 10D and 10E on your item agenda. We wish to re-review the reports and bring them back to committee at a later date, please.
Thank you very much. Item 6, urgent business. Do we have any items of urgent business you wish to bring? No, thank you. Number 7, local plan update is normally Simon, but today Simon's not available, so Rebecca is going to take it. Thank you.
So the local plan update is as follows. The partial update. The examination into the single policy partial update of the local plan, policy INF03, will take place between Tuesday the 18th and Thursday the 20th of April 2023 at the Memorial Hall in Dereham. The programme officer, Nikki Clark, is the contact for any person who has an interest in the examination and as a liaison between the inspectors, council and representatives. Nikki is an independent officer of the examination and works on behalf of the inspector to organise and manage the administrative and procedural elements of the examination process. Any questions should be directed to her. Her contact details are on the council website, but obviously if you're struggling to find them, please let me know and I'll put you in touch. With regards to the full update, the issues and options consultation on the local plan full update begun on the 10th of March and will run until May the 19th, 2023. The issues and options consultation is an important part of the local plan process, where the community is asked how they would like to tackle a range of planning issues and proposed options for the future development of the district. The consultation does not identify potential sites or draft policy wording. Details of this consultation is available on the council's website and Commonplace community engagement platform. The council has recently appointed specialist community engagement specialists, 2 specialists, and will be working with these throughout the issues and options consultation and further regulation 18 consultation throughout 2023. Further evidence is being commissioned on housing and economic development needs, gypsy and travelling show people needs and flood risk. That is the local plan update.
Thank you. If members do have any questions, then we would take them and pass them on to Simon. I'm not expecting Rebecca to answer these today. So any questions at all that you wish to pass on at this stage? No, thank you very much. Okay, we move on to agenda item 8, which is Tree Preservation Order TPO 2022, number 10 at Banham. And I'll pass you over to Richard Fisher. I do need 2 speakers to come forward, which is Richard Plom, who is a supporter, if you'd like to come sit on the right-hand side, sir, and also Oliver Ashford, who's an objector. I'd like to come out and sit on the right-hand side, please, sir. Yeah, anywhere you feel comfortable. Robin Plom. Yeah, did I say Richard? Oh, I see. 2 Richards. Richard, Robin, Oliver. Good. Okay, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, we're here to look at a objection we received to a TPO served in Grove Road in Banham. The TPO was served in August. The TPO was served on the back of the refusal of a planning permission. Prior to that, the trees weren't thought to be under threat. Following the refusal of the TPO, a request was received to TPO the trees, following paint being applied to the trees, presumably identifying the trees for removal. So, as you can see, we have the site outlined in red here. Further outline on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is an overall aerial picture showing the site. As you can see, it's very well treed on the edge of the village. Here is a list of the trees, individuals and groups covered by this current TPO and the layout on the grounds. Now, we're viewing the trees looking south along Grove Road towards the Kenninghall Road. The trees subject to this TPO are picked out by the blue arrow. Again, looking north from the junction of Kenninghall Road and Grove Road. Again, the blue arrow indicates the trees. Sample of some of the trees throughout the site, T1 ash on the left and the cherries and birch of G1 on the right-hand side there. This is a shot on the northern boundary of G2, T5 to T8, consisting of lime and beech trees, and an internal shot of T2 cedar. You can see on the trunk of the cedar tree, there's a spot of yellow paint. Okay, that's my presentation. Any questions?
No, we'll do that later.
Oh, my apologies.
Okay. Right, okay, thank you. Okay, we've got Robin Plom, please, who's a supporter. And you have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you. Could you just switch your microphone on? It's the black box in front of you. It's sort of like a dot with 2 wavy lines above. That's it.
Okay. Basically, I'd like to thank you, the members of council, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Reed Farm community, Grove Road, Balham. We believe that the TPO 2022/10 should remain and be renewed to protect the beautiful mature trees in this area. Just as a side note, 13% of the British Isles is woodland and should be protected. The trees and surrounding grounds support a numerous number of species of wildlife, which include nesting buzzards, woodpeckers, hedgehogs, deers, bees, and many more species. We feel it would be a travesty to lose these trees prematurely, as planning permission for the area has been rejected twice and now waiting on a decision from the Secretary of State. Nothing in the proposed planning permission 3PL 2021-0394F has changed, and the conditions of the refusal remain the same. With regard to the actual appeal against the TPO, I would like to draw your attention to a couple of points that we believe are quite frankly pointless. Section 2.2 states that T4 maple tree will drop leaves and cause a nuisance. My question is to whom, as it's in the sort of the back end of the area we're talking about. It also states that G2 trees have limited visual amenity, which we disagree on. Many people in the village walk this route and they often comment on how beautiful they are. As you can see from those photographs taken from my back garden, you know, we just love them. The removal of T2, T3, T4, T7 and G1 is only for the benefit of the developer, so he can access the land with the machinery for possible development of the area, where I reiterate that the planning permission has not been granted. Once again, we sincerely thank you for allowing us to speak and would ask for you to extend the TPO indefinitely, or at least until we get an answer from the Secretary of State. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Oliver Ashford, please, who's an objector. If you switch yours off and you switch yours on, sir. Okay, that's fine. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Good morning. I speak on behalf of our client, Mr. Simon Hazelby, with regards to objecting to TPO 10 of 2022. Application reference 3PL/2021/0394/F was refused on the 27th of October 2021 for 6 dwellings on land at Reed Farmhouse. During the course of the application, the scheme was amended to address concerns raised by the Tree and Countryside Officer, and on the 4th of August 2021, the council's Tree and Countryside consultant stated that they were satisfied with the amended layout of the scheme, and within the officer report at paragraph 7.2, the officer states that the proposal has been amended during the course of the application in an attempt to address concerns raised by the Tree and Countryside Officer, which is include omitting 1 dwelling from the proposal to ensure the retention of a category B1 tree. The Tree and Countryside Officer has no longer objects to the amended proposal, although did seek for the AIA to be updated. It's clear from the above that during the course of the application, it was not considered that the trees are of high value and not worthy of protection, and the council had no objection to the proposed removals to facilitate the development. The application is currently subject to an appeal, and it is during the process that the council have sought to serve a TPO 7 days after the final comment stage of the appeal process. Paragraph 38 of the NPPF refers that local planning authorities should approach decisions on proposed development in a positive and creative way, and that they should work proactively with applicants. The appellant would argue that a proactive and positive approach has not been taken with regards to serving of this TPO due to the lack of correspondence and engagement and the timing of its service. Notwithstanding the procedural matter outlined above, our client objects to the serving of the TPO for the following reasons. With regards to individual, collective and wider impact, all trees were assessed as part of the arboricultural impact assessment produced for the proposed development of the site. As this highlights, a number of trees subject to the proposed TPO contain potential future limb failures and significant structural issues. And this clearly evidences the reasoning why a number of trees are not of high value and not worthy of protection, and why the TPO should not be confirmed. The trees are also not particularly rare or historic, and therefore further confirms they are not worthy of preservation. Further details of these points are provided within our objection letter. It is respectfully requested that for the reasons highlighted above and within the objection, that the order is not confirmed or modifications made to include only those trees which would not restrict the proposed scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's open to questions from members. Councillor Attawell, please.
Could I just ask the tree officer a question regarding these apparent limb failures on these trees? When you visited the site, was that evident?
No, no evidence of any outward signs of any limb failure or anything like that that was recorded at the time of the survey and subsequent visits.
Please do.
Is it fair to say that leaves falls from trees once a year?
Yeah, that's all part and parcel of living next door, under or with mature trees, or any trees of deciduous trees of any age, really.
Councillor Kittle-Morris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wonder whether it's relevant or not, what the planning application was, what grounds the planning application was refused on, and was it anything to do with those trees at all?
It's not relevant, but I can tell you that information. So the application wasn't refused on tree grounds. It was refused on principal policy grounds, so it conflicts with your housing policies in terms of location. That the development, it would be an over-intensive development, which would create harm to the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. And there were numerous highways, 3 highways reasons for refusal as well, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's a comment rather than a question. Under 9.2, which talks about the basis of any TPO, and I think it's not always widely appreciated that, as in the last line, it says the TPO should therefore be required for consultation rather than the blanket prohibition of works. I think it said it isn't understood that TPO doesn't mean that a tree is left alone, in perpetuity. It can be felled, it can be managed, etc. But it's the need for consultation. I think sometimes that point may be sometimes overlooked by different parties. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Councillor Attawell, you wish to ask another question?
Yeah, I just want to ask another question, this gentleman over here. These trees in there, do you get much bird life?
Yeah, we've got hundreds of birds coming in. We get woodpeckers, and we've got buzzards that have started to nest. It's an absolute joy to have these birds coming in, long-tailed tits, you name it. And I'm a bit of a bird watcher anyway, and I just feel it's such a great area for them.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions from members at all? No, thank you. So with regards to Banham and reference TPO 2022 number 10, your officer's recommendation is to confirm the order. Can I have show of hands to confirm the order, please? Unanimous. Sorry, councillor Brain, did you vote or not? Oh, you did. Sorry, I couldn't see you because Mr Gilbert's head was in the way. Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you. This order's been confirmed. Thank you for your time, Richard. Okay, we jumped ship slightly on. Now we're going to Dereham. Two applications here, 3PL 2022-1065, which is a variation, and 3PL 2022-1071 in an outline format, both at Dereham. I have speakers. I have Tony Needham, who's the clerk of the Dereham Town Council, Terry Harper, who's the agent, and Councillor Philip Morton, who's the neighbouring ward rep. If you'd like to come sit on the right-hand side, please, gentlemen. I say we've jumped ship because we do have a deferred application, which we will take after this one. So when you're ready, Chris, it's over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. So, just bear with me. So items 10A, 10B, we're in Dereham. Two applications relate to the same site. Now, members that were at committee in December of last year will remember we had 3 applications relating to this housing allocation. So there is an extant consent on the site. So one of the applications, 10A, relates to proposed amendments to the wording of that consent, and that is essentially to enable a slot-in application, which is the second application, 10B, for 89 additional homes on the site allocation. And that application, as you'll see, is 3PL 2022-10710, and that seeks outline planning consent for the development of a maximum of 89 dwellings and associated infrastructure, all matters reserved. So we're looking at the principle there. So just draw you through just highlight the reports there. They run item A from pages 26 to 47, 10B to from 48 to 79 in the main report, with the supplementary report on page 78 and 79. So in terms of that first application, we have the extant site here. So you recall it's on the southern edge of Dereham. So we've got the Mid-Norfolk Railway line bordering the eastern boundary, Westfield Lane here, the Yaxham Road running north, south, just to the east of the site. The Shipton Road A1075 runs due west of the site where my cursor is. We've got Westfield Road then linking south from Dereham to Westfield, and Winborough down in this location. So in terms of, mentioned that we've got two applications here, and this is the site for the additional 89 units. So we're dealing with a smaller section of this site. It's obviously located in the northern corner, within obviously proximity to adjoining Westfield Lane, Westfield Road. We've got particular notes, obviously the residential areas to the north and east, industrial units here, Toffwood Infant and Junior School just to the northeast, with Fred Nicholson just further north. In terms of the proposals, as mentioned, I'll go through those in more detail in a moment. Just to pick you up on some of the history, you may recall this from December, but this is the extant consent in terms of an indicative master plan for the site. So that original consent was granted in 2020, and we see an indicative layout here. So this consent allows for 291 homes. The site allocation is approximately 290 dwellings. Just move forward. So the second application with us is that outline application, and this is an indicative site layout for this site here. So we've got the units obviously along this new estate road. So this estate road linking Westfield Lane in the northeast to Shipton Road in the west was the first reserve consent, and that was considered and approved in the committee in December. So this will continue due southwest past this site. We're considering the additional 89 units. We've got open space here in the northwest, additional areas at either ends as well. And you'll note in this kind of northwest corner is an indication of a drop-off site potentially for the school. Schools just see to the north here, we've got the Toffwood Infants and Junior Schools, a short distance to the northwest. And that's how that would, well, when we're looking obviously at that outlined master plan previously for 291, this is how the additional units would integrate with that, and how a scheme of in total of 380 would look overall. We could see that link road continuing to Shipton Road here, and the roundabout, again, part of the reserve. Matters consent is a link road up to here, and we've got full consent for that roundabout granted earlier this year. So just in relation to how it sits with our local plan, we've got the site allocation here in purple. So here it is running from the railway line to Shipton Road at this end. In terms of, you can see how it relates to the broader countryside, Yaxham due southwest, the River Tud running along the southern boundary. See areas of Toffwood just northwest. There's a further site allocation due west as well for more homes within the local plan. In terms of immediate context and character, you've probably seen this image from December, but yeah, we can see the arable kind of form and character of the land at the moment. See residential properties at Westfield due south beyond the River Tud. We've got the schools you can pick out just here in the playing fields. Residential areas border the site, obviously to the north, northwest, industrial units at this top end. The railway line you can see quite clearly there. Just picking up in terms of the immediate site and views along Westfield Lane, so towards the railway bridge. So the railway bridge is just beyond that bend. We've got the industrial units here on our left, and the site sits beyond the hedgerow there. And that's the view the other way, so facing west. The residential properties there, mixture, single 2-storey dwellings fronting onto the Westfield Lane and the site beyond this side. And that's the open field here, so the site obviously within the immediate foreground here, the railway line beyond, and Yaxham Road beyond that. And that's the junction of Westfield Road, Westfield Lane towards the application site. So open space here, and the proposed drop-off area would be in this kind of location here beyond this hedgerow. And that's that view at the junction there. The residential homes and dwellings sit beyond there, Boyd Avenue, just beyond the hedgerow there. There's that indicative master plan again. Just talk you through some of the consultation responses and issues through the application. So you'll see in the report, Dereham Town Council have raised objections to the proposals, along with Dereham Town Council concerns have also been raised from Yaxham Parish Council, Wimber and Westfield as well. But principally in terms of the comments from Dereham Town Council, they highlight that the 89 units would represent a 30% increase beyond the allocation. So as mentioned, the allocation is for 290 units. And we will come on to that matter in a moment. Other concerns raised relate to the detailed layout of the indicative site. Just here, in terms of that, I'd highlight that the application is in outline with all matters reserved, so it is subject to a detailed design stage and application in due course. Concerns have also been raised about the drop-off location and access. As mentioned, we are looking at an outline application with all matters reserved again, and part of the proposals would be that this section of Westfield Road would be closed from the link road here northwards, so it provide a pedestrian cycle link, so access could be provided alternatively onto that rather than the northern boundary, and then link up to the pedestrian footway to the schools up here. Other concerns relate to the cycle provision and the transport assessment submitted with this outline application. So in terms of the proposals, as developed through the application, the applicants have put forward proposals for a cycle link along Yaxham Road. So we've got the images here. So the southern edge of Yaxham Road and Westfield Lane junction here runs northward towards the Tesco A47 roundabout, which we sit just beyond in that direction. So in terms of this application, I mean, the proposals here are looking, as mentioned, at those 89 units at the northeastern corner of the site, and its officers views that this link along the Yaxham Road is more appropriate than further improvements to the northwest along the Shipton Road. Now, these proposals aren't in replacement to the proposals and connections in that northwest location towards the National Cycle Network number 13, which members may recall was discussed in the last committee in December. So this is these measures are for the proposed 89 units here, rather than the broader scheme for the 291, which would be picked up under condition under that extent consent. In terms of other aspects raised, as mentioned, the other parish councils raised concern about the impacts in terms of the character, impacts on highways, congestion, and those matters, which will come on in due course. In terms of other concerns, you note from the report, we've had a number of objections from the local communities, and those do kind of centre on some of the common threads we get from housing developments in terms of impacts on the infrastructure locally, in terms of education, health, impacts on roads, congestion. I mean, as you'll see through the report, we've kind of looked at those kind of concerns in terms of highways, drainage, environment. But in terms of those kind of local infrastructure, you'll also see there's obligations being secured through a legal agreement to secure education contributions, healthcare contributions, and contributions to the library facilities. So in terms of some of those kind of themes and issues, in terms of the principle, obviously you'll see from section 1.0 of the assessment section of the report for item 10B, you know, it's clearly established there that we've got a consent on this site for residential. We've also got extent got an housing allocation, so that the principle of a residential use here is clearly established. What essentially, you know, we're looking at is additional units, those additional 89, and what impacts that has. So, you know, we've gone into detail on the housing criteria, housing allocation criteria, and officers' views is there's no, these additional 89 do not conflict with those criteria. So those criteria look at character, landscape, open space, and as I'll touch on going through those themes, it's considered that the 89 units still provided adequate open space. As we can see from the kind of, in terms of landscape here, we've got additional, we've got this additional 89 units here, but when you factor in the remaining, we've still got all this open space in these yellow areas and in this purple area here, which when you amount that in total, it's roughly 12.53 hectares, which is over half of the site in totality. So, so when we look at the kind of landscape impacts, there's still a buffer, a substantial break here along the southern boundary. You'll see that there's these areas of open space kind of break through the proposed built form. So, you know, they kind of break down that mass as you would view it from the open countryside to the south. So when we look at impacts on landscape and character, those impacts aren't considered to be harmful in that regard when we look at the extant consent and the allocation. In terms of the density of the site, that's obviously an impact here. It goes from 22 to 28 overall across the site. So what we're looking at, you know, obviously is an increase, but overall as a site, 20 dwellings per hectare isn't considered to be out of the ordinary for a housing site on the edge of a market town. But what we also do need to factor in is, just go to this image. What we're considering here is the 89 units, and that is a density of 25. So we've got Boyd Avenue here, which amounts to 22 dwellings per hectare. So there is again a slight increase, but that's when you consider the kind of that increase. It's not considered to be harmful, and it's not considered to kind of cause significant harm to the character of the street scene and townscape. So overall, when you actually look at the whole site, it's still a low density. Apologies. So when you factor in the whole site again, the density is down to 17 dwellings per hectare. So again, when we consider all that in the round, the proposals aren't considered, although they're increasing the number of units, it's not considered to be a harmful increase. In terms of other aspects, I've touched on kind of the highways and transport issues. Now that's a very significant concern locally raised by the town council and residents. We're obviously aware of the issues within that area. Now, I mean, the application has been supported by transport system assessment. It has looked at those impacts both from the 291 extant consent and these additional units. And you'll see in that report, it's looked at capacity of the junctions as well. And the conclusions of that report and the Highways Authority are that the proposals are acceptable in highways terms. When we look at the tests in the NPPF, those are quite, there is a high bar, and applications like this can only be refused if those impacts are severe. And clearly, it's officers' views that those aren't. In terms of the scheme we discussed in December, there are those key, and touched on, there are those key off-site improvement works. So the roundabout on the Shipton Road and improvements to the railway bridge, which sits just off the application site here. Now the proposals aren't impacting on the trigger points for those. The roundabout would remain at the 50th occupation across the site, and the railway bridge at the 150th unit. Now, what we're looking at here, and the comments from the Highways Authority are that those 150 would need to take into account the additional 89. So when we look at the actual phasing of it, I'll just talk you through it. This is the proposed phasing plan for the site. So phase 1 is the highways infrastructure. Phase 2 is actually this green edged area here, so the southwest. So that would be the first residential parcel. We've then got the second parcel here, phase 2, as we head easterly. Phase third residential phase here, and the final one is this site for the 89 units. So at present, those additional units would only come on board once those key highways infrastructures were in place. You'll note from the report, condition 5 does seek to secure a condition to seek approval for the phasing plan. Now, actually on review, it's officers' views that having regard to the other obligations we're seeking the legal agreement, it'd be more appropriate to include that within the legal agreement. The applicants have agreed to that. So we're actually proposing the removal of condition 5, and that actual requirement to deliver in accordance with the phasing plan would be secured by a legal agreement. In terms of other concerns about cycling, we've touched on. Let's say there's conditions 13 and 14 that secure those off-site improvements along the Yaxham Road, which link those 89 units to the commercial areas that we see around us. So as set out in the report, this officer's views in regard to the highways officer's comments, the evidence that there's no significant harm to highway safety and the capacity of the road network. Touching on kind of amenity aspects, as mentioned, we've got an extant consent and allocation for housing on this site. We can see, having regard to those proposals that, as indicated, just go back to that detailed layout. There would be some residential areas to the rear of Boyd Avenue, but there is the break of the road here, and again, Westfield Lane would separate the site. So overall, it's not considered in principle to cause any overriding amenity concerns. There are conditions that would deal with impacts during the construction phase. In terms of those are conditions 15 and 16. In terms of trees, the site itself is relatively clear. We've got the hedgerows, and trees that run along the boundary. The tree officer hasn't raised objections to the proposals, but as recommended in the supplementary report, we're also adding a condition that secures the reserve matters are informed by an updated AIA tree survey and impact assessment that ensures that actually when that layout is considered, it takes into account tree constraints. In terms of ecology and wildlife, again, a concern raised by the local community. You'll see from the report that our ecologist has raised no objections following the submission of additional information. So there are conditions that are included within the report. Now, just an update to members today, we're considering the comments of the ecologist. We're actually recommending an additional condition that does seek to recommend a condition that requires ecological mitigation enhancement measures as set out in the ecological appraisals and surveys submitted, and that's as recommended by our ecologist. And it's also recommended that actually we word condition 11 to also reflect what our ecologist has also requested in their comments. Now, members will be aware of the nutrient neutrality issue. We are in the catchment area of the affected habitat sites. And you'll also see in the report and the submission, the applicants have submitted a shadow habitat regs assessment and also a nutrient impact assessment report. Within that, it sets out a mitigation apologies. There's a series of measures there which include various aspects, including on-site waste treatment works, land being removed from arable use. So having reviewed that, we're awaiting the comments from Natural England. However, you'll see from the report, we're seeking authority to conclude the HRA once we have those comments. In terms of the green infrastructure and recreational avoidance mitigation strategy, we're recommending that a financial contribution be secured through the legal agreement, and that's included in the draft section 106 agreement. In terms of flood risk and drainage, again, a common concern. Again, this site has been reviewed by the Flood Authority and Environment Agency a number of times. The proposals include a series of surface water drainage measures, including attenuation ponds with a discharge rate to the RiverTud. Now, the lead local flood authority have raised no objections to this. And you'll see conditions are recommended in the report to secure those attenuation measures. In terms of other aspects, bear with me. There's also conditions within the report that are recommended to address any ground contamination and archaeological features found on site. I touched on the planning obligations that would be required for this. We would be securing 25% affordable housing, so that accounts to 23 units on this site. So it's a significant gain there from a social perspective, along with the additional 89 homes. We've touched on the further kind of community provision in terms of education and library facilities and healthcare contributions. And as mentioned, there's contributions within the legal agreement that would deal with environmental impacts off-site in terms of the habitat sites and the provision of on-site open space, but also linking to the broader open space as we can see on this plan. So that broader open space in terms of sport and open space provision there. So in terms of the recommendations before you, item 10A seeks the amendment to conditions 3, 15, 16 and 17 to allow the slot-in application, and that's recommended for approval subject to those revisions to the wording. In terms of item 10B, so that's the outline application for the additional 89 units. So obviously when considering the application, the proposals do provide additional 89 units over the site allocation policy. But when we have a look at the proposals, they sit within the settlement boundary of Dereham, a market town that's allocated for growth within the local plan. It's considered to be a sustainable location. When we look at some of the social aspects as considered, as mentioned, there's improvements in terms of affordable housing provision. There's mitigation in terms of education, healthcare, etc. But when we consider other gains in terms of economic side, in terms of the construction period and investment from the local community in services and facilities, spend in the area. That's a further gain. Now the proposals, when we look at the site, as mentioned, they can, due to the low kind of, due to the amount of open space and the low density of the outline and allocation, those additional 89 units can be accommodated without harmful impacts to the character of the surrounding landscape and townscape. As mentioned, highways impacts are considered to be acceptable, and there's improvements and off-site works proposed and secured by condition. So overall, whilst there would be change to the site, it would be impacts. Those impacts can be appropriately mitigated for via the conditions and obligations that we're securing within the report there. So overall, the proposals are still considered to reflect and respond favourably to the local plan. They don't compromise the site allocation policies and do reflect the approach and policies HOUO6 in terms of making the best use of a site, in terms of making sure the density is respective of the character of the area. And accordingly, some of the guidance within the NPPF does again reiterate making sure that sites do make best and most efficient, an effective use of the sites. And obviously, as noting, this is a site allocation on the edge of a market town. The proposals are considered to accord with the guidance in our local plan and the NPPF in that regard. So as mentioned, the proposals, items 10A is recommended for approval subject to those amended conditions on pages 35 and 47. And item 10B, so the outline application, all matters reserved, is also recommended for approval. It's subject to the no objections being raised by Natural England, National Highways, but also those conditions as referred to in the report and supplementary and as amended today. And part of that is obviously seeking the authority for officers to complete the legal agreement and complete the HRA assessment once we have those comments from Natural England. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor Morton, would you wish to go first or last? Okay, thank you. And we've got Tony Needham, please, who's the Town Clerk of Dereham Town Council. 3 minutes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This application isn't so much a slot-in application as a cram them in application. I remember sitting with the at the local planning inspection with the planning inspector when this site was considered, and at that time it was for a minimum of 291. Now I remember the planning inspector raising his eyebrows, going, "A minimum of 291?" And the applicant was there, and it was agreed. Now 291 would be about the right density, and it was changed in the local plan to say around 291. At that time, the applicant and the planning inspector felt 291 was about the right density. Now, I'm sure you can calculate the density taking in this bit of land and that bit of land and make it look whatever you like. But if you look at the actual size of the plots compared to the adjacent plots that are already there, you will see how dense this development is. And you read it, this site is clearly visible from a long way off, from Winborough, from Yaxham. It's a really big site in the landscape. And if you compare the plot sizes, you'll see how dense it is. They really are cramming them in. And we think that's a great shame. On the transport assessment, I had a quick look at the transport assessment this morning. And yeah, if I was a Norfolk County Council highways officer, I'd look at that and I go, well, yeah, no problem with that. However, I live near Dereham and drive in Dereham on a regular basis. And looking at the transport assessment, I just looked at one junction, which is the Tesco's roundabout, which a lot of you will be very familiar with. So, and looking at that on a 2027 figure with all the growth in Dereham, including this 89, they say in 2027, the queues coming out of Tesco's on a Saturday morning will only be 1.2 cars. Yeah, and the queues coming into Dereham on the Yaxham Road will be 0.6 of a car. Now, I tend to avoid coming into Dereham that way on a Saturday morning because quite often it can be queued right back to Dumpling Green. So I'm not criticising the highways officer for saying this is acceptable because they probably don't drive in Dereham. However, I do drive in Dereham, and I can say they haven't validated their predictions against what's actually happening on the ground at the moment. So I think that should be looked at again, because this is just fiction, it really is. Also, what we used to get when we did transport assessments was they'd look at the Tavern Lane junction and the Lynn Hill junction as well, because we know they're all connected, they're all linked into each other, and the queues back up and affect each one. This transport assessment hasn't covered Tavern Lane and Lynn Hill. And I think it's a real shame. They're missing out. Why not? I don't know. We always used to. But yeah, I mean, if they think queues coming into Dereham on a Saturday morning is going to be half a car, well, this is just nonsense, really is. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, looking at that, yeah, you wouldn't object. But actually, if you looked at that and you knew what Dereham was like on a Saturday morning and every morning of the week and every evening of the week, then you'd say that's just a bit of fiction. Cycle lanes, great to see the cycle lane coming in along Yaxham Road, looks great. I seem to recall when the bridge was going in, I asked for that to be made wider to accommodate the cycle lane. And I think at the time I was told, no, we can't ask for that because there's no cycle lane on the other side for it to link to. Well, there is a cycle lane on the other side for it to link to. And thanks to the chairman and this committee, we have got a bridge. So can we make it wider now? So you haven't got to get off your bike, walk over the bridge, then pick up the cycle lane on the other side. That's pretty much all I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Terry Harper, please, who's the agent.
Hello, Terry Harper from Glaven Hill. I haven't got a great deal to say in addition to the report on the officer because it's been fairly comprehensively covered, but I certainly wanted to come along and give an opportunity for any questions. I think the density is an interesting point because there are lots of different ways you can calculate density. But I think there's two fundamental points to me. One is your local plans policy DC2, which refers to low density development of 22 to 30. We're 28. So it is at the upper end of low density, but it is still low density. Your own local plan says higher density is 40 onwards. Yes, it is a higher density than Boyd Avenue, but Boyd Avenue is a historic development from the 70s, 80s, when things were all very low density. We all know that brownfield should be put first, but when there's not enough brownfield, we need to use greenfield on an urban edge, which is where we are. But greenfield should be used efficiently. There is enough land to put many more houses. That's not what we're choosing to do. We're trying to get the balance right. And I think when there's 60 acres of open space on this site, I think it's quite a low density. And when we look at the master plan, and it's an indicative sketch, but it does not read, you would struggle to read the difference between 291 and 380 because there are lots of green gaps and there is lots of open space to the south. It's always been a transition to work through denser as you get closer to the town. Traffic, I think what we need to remember is one of the fundamental points of this scheme is the link road, the 6.5 metre link road. The whole point of traffic on this scheme is to reduce Tesco Roundabout and Tavern Lane junctions. We want people to come up from Yaxham along the link road onto Shipton Road, so they don't go that way. That is a fundamental point of the design where we want to try and give an alternative relief. And a further thing is we, like the town council, want to get people on these bikes, so they shouldn't be in so many cars. All we can do is all we can to try and provide bus. We're looking at to get the bus along the link road, walking and cycle links. So there should be less cars, as well as diverting a lot of the cars that are already going that way. They're fundamentally the two main points, I think, but I'd welcome any questions.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Morton, please, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I object to this piecemeal development as it does not comply with a number of Breckland policies. Firstly, TR1, which calls for development to minimise the need to travel, promote sustainable transport, not adversely impact on the operational safety of the strategic road network. TR2 calls for developments to be of high quality. sustainable in design, construction and layout, as well as offering maximum flexibility in the choice of travel modes. I contend that this development does not satisfy these policies as it fails to have a safe cycle and pedestrian routes. This will lead to generating further vehicle traffic. The opportunity to develop a cycle and pedestrian route to the centre of Dereham and secondary schools has not been taken. Instead, there will be extra traffic during school times going over the Westfield Bridge and onto Yaxham Road. The Highways Department have judged that this extra 89 houses can be accommodated without creating a severe problem. I disagree. This policy of accepting extra infill units detracts from the original planning application. And in particular, I ask you to consider if the extra traffic can be safely going over a bridge with only 5.5mm width, open to all forms of traffic. I also object on the grounds that this is another piecemeal development that is part of a bigger plan that should be considered as a whole rather than as a final add-on. There needs to be full consideration of the infrastructure requirements for Toffwood to be able to cope with the extra number of houses being proposed in the forthcoming call for sites. Allowing development to go ahead, which increases the density of housing, increases the traffic flow, and reduces the level of open space, leads to a poorer quality stock of housing. This should be refused, and instead, there should be a focus on what is best in the long term for the Toffwood area, such as a health centre, secondary school, linked cycle routes, and a network of open spaces.
Thank you, Councillor. It's open to questions from members. I've got Councillor Attawell, Councillor Gilbert, Councillor Daigan and Councillor Clark. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. What if the officers could just clarify a couple of points for me, and then I want to talk about the wider traffic impact. Can you tell me exactly what the health contribution is? Because in your report, unless I've missed it, there's no mention of the figure that's been asked for. That's the first one.
Yeah, the figure is 117,000. 296, so £117,296. That's been requested from NHS in order to mitigate the impacts of the additional 89 units. All in terms of the total, well, the applicant may be able to confirm the remainder, but that contribution is specifically to deal with the 89. That's the application that we're considering in terms of the impacts today, in terms of the additional, and that's all we can secure via the outline application.
Okay, thank you. Can you confirm that, please, with additional figure? Councillor Attawell.
And can you just confirm to me the figures on the education contribution then? So where we say there's going to be 34 children, that's just for these 89 dwellings, is it? Okay, and there's nothing mentioned in here about high schools. So as part of the overall package, I'm talking about the whole site, is there any provision in there for high schools?
I can check, go back through the original legal agreement. It's not for this, the additional 89, because there's a contribution of approximately 1.2 million already for the original and broader site. This current need is only for the junior infant schools and early education. I don't know if the applicant.
Yes, I believe that's correct, because there's sufficient capacity in the high school. It's the other schools which need the funding, but I think there's going to be 1.25, 1.3 million from memory, forgive me, towards education. But fundamentally, there is quite a lot of capacity in the high school. If there isn't capacity, then payments need to be made, of course, but where there is capacity, that will help the vitality of the school.
Still got some further questions, Councillor Atwell?
Yeah, I want to talk about traffic, if I may. I get sick and tired of Norfolk County Council letting us get away with these piecemeal developments in Dereham, where we don't seem to have any master plan. Now, I take on board what the clerk from Dereham just said about the Tesco roundabout. Logic tells me that if you've got any traffic that's coming up from Shibden and they're going to want to get to the supermarkets in the town, they're going to want to go down this, turn off right at this roundabout, go up this link road, all try and get over the bridge. And they're all going to be trying to get on the Tesco roundabout on a Saturday morning, where you're quite right, that is total chaos. We were also promised previously, previous applications for Dereham, that we were going to have a roundabout Tavern Lane. Then we were told, after all the applications were approved, that on reflection, we can't make that happen. The cycle lanes, I agree that there needs, if you're going to have a cycle route, then let's have it go over the bridge as well. Why have you got to get off your bike to walk over the bridge to get back on the cycle route? Why do we have this piecemeal? And why haven't I got somebody from Norfolk County Council sitting here telling me what the master plan is? The other thing in this area that I think is relevant is that was announced in the press last week that they're going to close the Fred Nicholson School in that area. We don't know what's going to happen with that. Nobody's telling us what's going to happen with that site when it's finished. That will have an impact on the traffic. Again, this is Norfolk County Council. Will have a significant impact in that area. If that's sold for development, how is the two Toffwood Junior and Infant Schools going to be able to expand? These are all questions that I have about the big picture for Dereham. I'm sure the officer is going to tell me you can only look at the application before you, but damn it, I'm tired of that. Dereham deserves better. Dereham needs a master plan. We need somebody to sit down and look at what infrastructure we need and come up with a plan of how we're going to fund it. I'm not anti-housing. We need the houses. Anybody knows me knows I'm not anti-housing. We do need housing, but you can't keep adding on all these sites in the town and expecting the existing infrastructure to cope. We're also talking about the Lynn Hill roundabout. We're looking to, I think, where we've got the old Bussey showroom. That's all going to propose to be a Lidl's coming out of there. Well, how is this all linking in with this? What is the plan for this route to get in and out of the town? I can't support this unless somebody can tell me what the master plan is. And I think that's incumbent on us. I think it's really important that we take account of that as this planning committee to make sure we're not adding to the problem in Dereham without actually putting a foot down and saying, Norfolk County Council, come to the table and tell us what the big picture is for Dereham and how you're going to help us solve the issues so we can build the houses, get the infrastructure we need, and everybody can be a bit happier about the process. Can somebody answer me that?
I'm close on some of your viewpoints, but I'd rather Rebecca answers, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So, obviously members, I understand what Roger Attwell is saying, or Councillor Attwell, apologies, about what your concerns are with the wider aspects and all the other developments that are happening in Dereham. But I am going to have to remind you what your remit as a planning committee member is today. And your remit is to consider this application on its own merits in terms of any impacts that it will generate in terms of the impact either on the highways or the infrastructure or the school infrastructure. So your statutory consultees within this process have advised you that they've considered the impact of this 89 dwellings on the wider highway network. And members, I don't need to remind you that when we refused Dumpling Green on the opposite side of the road for 255 dwellings, we did not refuse that on highways grounds. We did not refuse that on highway safety grounds. There is capacity at the junction at Tesco's for those additional 255 dwellings, and this is only 89 of those. The Highways Authority have assessed the additional information that's come in with this application. That additional impact from 89 dwellings is not severe and therefore does not cause a significant impact on those roundabouts. And any later investigation into this application would conclude on the grounds that the County Council Highways advice, as our statutory consultee, is the advice we should be taking in the determination of a planning application. Furthermore, we have always said with the Westfield Road development, we've already approved the 291. And even when we were considering Dumpling Green, was that this link road through the development onto Westfield Road would actually ease the capacity of the junction at the Tesco's roundabout. And therefore this development creates capacity at that roundabout. It doesn't reduce capacity at that roundabout. And that is still the case with the additional add-on of these 89 dwellings. With regards to the quoting of the transport assessment, you need to look at that assessment as a whole. So those vehicle impacts, those vehicle numbers are very specific, but they're average vehicle impacts over a period of an hour. So the vehicle increase in numbers is actually higher at those junctions, but then there's an average out over that peak period of an hour. So, you know, it's not as simple as just looking at the individual figures within that report. It has to be read as a whole. It's been read as a whole by your Highways Authority, who are your statutory advisors in this regard. With regard to the local infrastructure, of course, we're concerned about the local medical and school infrastructure, but again, we take our advice from the Health Authority and from the County Council Education Authority. And what Mr. Harper's already explained is fundamentally true in your deliberations, that you can only request monies for infrastructure where there isn't capacity already within those infrastructures to meet the needs of the development. And under the Education Authority, under the County Council Education comments, there is capacity within the high school network for these additional 89 dwellings. There isn't capacity at the primary schools, and therefore they're saying that that capacity can be mitigated through a contribution secured through a Section 106 agreement. And again, that is your statutory advisor telling you that there is advice there to be met. Again, the NHS have told us that they can mitigate any impacts on health through what they're allowed to request through the request of monies in a Section 106 agreement. And as the applicants set out, they're willing to accept those contributions as part of this development in the event it was approved. So of course, we want a wider master plan for Dereham. Of course, we want a wider strategy for what's going on, but that's your local plan process, members. That is not your determination of planning applications. Each application should be determined on its own merits. This is an allocated site within the local plan. Our recommendation to you is that an additional 89 dwellings doesn't have the impacts that you're suggesting on the highways network or the local infrastructure based on our advice from our statutory consultees.
Councillor Atwell, would you like to gird your loins or would you like to continue on a roll? Because I've got other people wishing to add. Okay.
My job sitting here as a member of this planning committee is to question the information that's in front of me. If a statutory consultee told me the moon's made of cheese, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to question it. I'm not going to sit here like a nodding dog and take what they tell me as gospel. And I still think there is a massive problem around this town. There is no master plan. There hasn't been a master plan, and I don't think that's going to be solved with the local plan either. I would like to get, whether that's subject of a different meeting, I'm sure, I'd like to get somebody down here from the County Council Highways, senior person, to tell me how this is all going to work in Dereham, because you're getting all these piecemeal applications, and I think this is going to be a real problem. I don't think we're taking account of that. I appreciate what you're saying, Rebecca. Got to look at the application before me. Yes, I get that, but we keep adding 89 here. We'll add some somewhere else. We haven't started the developments on the Swanton Morley Road, you know, leading out of Dereham yet. There's lots of pieces of land that have been given permission. We haven't even started. The cumulative impact. We as a committee should be looking at cumulative impact on the wider community. And I don't think we do that in this process. That's my point. I can't support this. I won't support this until somebody can tell me how they're going to mitigate the traffic with the, you know, we know there's applications coming up for various sites, like the Lidl site. How are we going to do it? What's the plan? Is this infrastructure going to be improved, or is it just going to creak under ever more traffic? That's me done. Thank you.
Yes, Rebecca, please.
Just really quickly, we have considered the cumulative impact of this development with the other developments that have planning approval, that any developments coming forward that don't have approval will have to consider them in light of what happens today with this application. But just to be really clear, we have discussed the cumulative impact with the Highways Authority, and it is on that basis they raise no objection to this application. Thank you.
I just want to, I'm going to take Councillor Gilbert a moment just to say that our 4 market towns that sit on our 2 major A routes are, if we could turn back time and before we build our bypasses, that we could look at them carefully. We know, for instance, if I start at the south, that Attleborough, we pushed Attleborough, we took development, we really put the pressure on Attleborough, and something is being done. We're looking at the routing from the bottom so that we can link up to a north-south. It was only ever an east-west, very similar to Derham's in its own right. That was the problem with Derham. It was a quick thing to improve the A47 and take it out of the town. But obviously, monies at the time, what have it, didn't take into account the north-south route. So at the moment, north-south or south-north, whichever way you want to go, has to travel through the town. Part of this is trying to alleviate that. The problem went as well with the exit off the eastbound route coming off, not being able to go on. There's problems there. I'm not going to take you, Clark, because otherwise we'll be here till evening. There's problems there, and we know it. And part of this is to trying to achieve housing along with some of the facility that we can. It's never going to be perfect, and I'm not condoning everything or pushing members into any corners. Just to say, I understand where you're coming from, and part of me agrees with you. I'm going to take Councillor Gilbert, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on what Councillor Atwell said, I think we are becoming a building approval committee and not a planning committee. Anyway, that's an aside. I'd like to talk about the density. Chris, could you bring up the proposed indicative site plan, please? Because we were talking about how do you measure density? Well, it's all very well to say we've got these houses surrounded by all this open space. But if you can bring it up. That one there, yeah. I wish we had a closer look at that, because I don't know whether you can bring it up at all. Doesn't matter if you can't, but I think yeah, we're getting there. I mean, do these houses have any gardens? Or, as I believe we now call them, private amenity space? Because they're all very well to say, we've got all this open space around you, you can go out there. But just people like to sit in their garden. I know not everybody wants a garden, so they live in apartments. But that, to me, is just so crammed in that if you're sitting in your garden and a couple next door having a quiet chat, you'll probably be able to hear everything they say. It is just too dense. There is no garden space, or as we call it, private amenity space. It's just too dense. My point. Thank you.
Rebecca, you wishing to come back on that?
Members, I would like to remind you that that's an indicative site layout, not the site layout, and the details of what are not to be considered at this stage. This is an outline planning application with matters reserved. Members, there is scope to change the layout of the site, and that will be assessed when we've got the details. It will be inappropriate now for you to take into consideration the detailed layout at this stage.
Councillor Gilbert.
I take on board what you say, Rebecca. So I am looking forward to the detailed application showing half of those with nice sized gardens. If we approve this, they're not going to come back and say we're going to build less, are they? They'll probably come back, if anything, and say, well, we can squeeze a few more in here now. No, can't support this.
I've got Councillor Daigan, please.
I think Councillor Gilbert has slightly taken one of the points. I've got 2 or 3 points to make and ask questions on. I think on the density, I'd agree with almost everything which Councillor Gilbert said. And I think at what point do we start lessening the densities on the edge of town? Because I think this is too high for an edge of town development. It may be more appropriate when you get into the centre of town, but I think edge of town surely, and this is how this development was sold, you know, I think about almost getting on for 10 years ago, I think, was, oh, it's going to be a very nice loose development on the outskirts of town. So when people coming in, they won't feel they're coming into an urban town immediately. It'll be a soft entrance to the town. And I think this is, even to the 291, I thought that's too hard. And now this is even coming too hard to constrained. And I'd agree with what Yaxham Parish Council has said about the entrance to the town not being quite right. And also you mentioned Boyd Avenue. I think I can remember back hearing when I was very young that Boyd Avenue was a bit overdeveloped, but now that is a very nice site. And if we're going to have houses here, if it was more in line with what you've got in Boyd Avenue, I think people might be things, because that is a lower density. And in fact, coming out of town, I think this should be a lower density than Boyd Avenue. That's on the density side. There's a whole load, it was mentioned about trees and hedges. There's a whole load of hedging down Westfield. We had that rather nice picture of Westfield Lane with all that greenery. Can we make sure, put an indicative in that if this has to go ahead, that we'd like to actually keep that greenery, and that shouldn't be, taken away, because I think that does sort of, that's such a nice bit of greenery, which I think should be maintained, but it looks like to me that would be gone. So that's a another point. And the phasing of the legal, we're going to have legal agreement instead of conditions. I think if you're in Dereham, I can remember, and the clerk will probably remind me, we've had a couple of 106 agreements, which suddenly, I think, I know to do other things, I think it was mainly to do with recreation and open spaces, which we thought we could can have a nice legal agreement. And the legal agreement then didn't really add up to what was in the what we'd agreed here. So I think I'd like to keep conditions, not legal agreements. I trust conditions more myself. And that's that. And just a couple of things for Roger had, I think, a couple of questions. Frednick, there's a whole, once a site comes available in the county council, there's a whole sort of range of things of how it must be dealt with. The first thing is it would go to the
Councillor, this is questions, not
no, well, I was just sort of thinking that
I understand that.
Yeah, that would be sort of
direct it as a question if you wish to make that
right.
point.
Yeah. And am I right in thinking that still the Lidl site is actually still being stalled because of highways?
That's not for question here today, not with
well, just to
relevance
point
to
that.
this matter. I know it was raised, but only
Yeah.
as a flippant point, for want of a better word. I'm not restricting any members, but this is not the forum or the time for that particular question. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And firstly, I've got a question to Chris. One of the conditions there on 10A is around the travel plan. And it talks about how to best incorporate infrastructure of pedestrian, cyclists and public transport. What's the next step if this application 10AB is approved today in terms of anything coming back at what may be coming back at reserve matters? And the other question I've got, that's one question. The other one is when you put up around the sort of the footpaths on the road, if you can clarify whether we've heard about the bridge from the clerk, but in terms of elsewhere, is there a footpath and cycleway for both sides or only one side? And when you've responded to me, I've then got a couple of observations. Thank you on the application. Thank you.
I'll just bring up a plan that might help show you in terms of just going through the footpath. Bear with me. So in terms of this broader provision, in terms of the footpath, so this was considered in December at the December Planning Committee. So what we've got in this link road is a segregated 3-metre cycleway and a further 1.8-metre footpath. That's shown on the northern side of that link road. And on the southern side is a 1.8 metre footpath on the link road. So that continues all the way from the Shipton Road roundabout junction all the way through here to the Westfield Lane junction here. In terms of the travel plan, again, there's no proposals to change in effect that condition today. What that condition would obviously require a submission to ourselves. We would, in terms of, we'd obviously have to consider the proposals put forward to address all the criteria within that. Just bear with me, I'll get the condition up. Yeah, so essentially within that first reserve matters application, which would be submitted to the council, we would have a travel plan there which would set out how, for instance, cycle links would be integrated, how bus provision, those kind of public transport aspects would be kind of brought into the residential development. Often they'll be informed by discussions between a developer and the Highways Authority in advance of that submission. So there'll be that kind of pre-discussion. But those remain for both the additional, you'll see in the report, that travel plan condition remains for the 291, and there's a recommended condition for the 89 units as well. So when that reserve matters application comes in, we'll have the detail of that.
Yeah, just one moment, Councillor Clark. I'm just going to have Rebecca come in about density, please.
Sorry, Councillor Clark, but while this is on the screen, just to say, members, just some facts about the site. There is over 12 hectares of open space on this site as a whole, where the residential development is. And there's a further over 12 hectares of open space to the south of the site. So when we're talking about visual impact and density, you need to consider that there's a whole 12 hectares of land, which is secured as meadowland to limit the visual impact as you drive into Dereham. And when we're talking about specific density numbers, if you're looking at just the residential element of the site with the open spaces, that is only 17 dwellings per hectare. As the overall site, it is the 89 dwellings, which is the higher density of development, which is closest to the settlement boundary of Dereham. So I heard in the debate earlier that you were concerned about, as you go out into the open countryside, that being such a hard edge to Dereham. And actually the reality is there'll be a much less denser edge to Dereham with the meadowland, and the higher denser areas is located to Dereham. And this would be a common strategy if we were looking at the site as a whole today with that number of dwellings. So I think it's important that you consider the site as a whole when you're looking at the impact of that on Dereham. You know, the individual site is denser, and it is not true that we couldn't go away and look at the numbers when we look at the reserve matters and the layout and how that's laid out. And obviously with a significant over provision of open space, members, we have got options to look at how we spread dwellings and use some of those spaces. So it is important to note that that 89, although is a higher density, that is closest to Dereham and the settlement boundary, and then it does become a lower density, and then you have that 12 hectares of meadowland to limit the impact as you drive up towards Dereham from that location to the south.
Councillor Clark, please.
Yes, thank you for that, Chris. As Boyd Avenue has been mentioned by a number of people, I've just got an observation that whenever that was built, I know that the council is consulting on design and other matters, and generally speaking, we should be aiming for higher and better standards, not just in design. And personally speaking, in going back to the Parker Morris standards that we had laid down, where we had that, whether that was for general housing or social housing, if we weren't in the planning committee, the chairman's remarks about turning back time reminded me of one of my favourite chair tracks, but I'm the singer, but I'm not going to do that on this occasion, you'll be relieved. Thank you.
Yeah, that was share and not chair, as in chairman. Councillor Brame, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. One I think would probably be to Rebecca and the other one would probably be to the solicitor. Having sat here through this morning, I realised that there may be elections in May. But the whole thing is we're supposed to be looking at this application on its merit for 89 houses. We had a slide up a little while ago, which was the thing that's already been passed, which was for 291. So I don't know why we're discussing that, but my question is to both of you, if we turn this down, can somebody explain to me on what planning grounds? Because I'm looking at this and I can see nothing that I can argue with the officers for. I understand that if we turn this down on non-planning grounds, there will probably be an appeal. And my question would be, who would be paying for that?
Thank you, councillor. You know, obviously as officers, we can't advise you what would be a potential reason for refusal because we don't believe that there is a reason for refusal on this application, and therefore we've made a professional recommendation to you as set out in the officer report. I think, you know, you need to determine the application on its own merits, but I do think there would be significant risk if you were to go against your statutory consultee's advice with regards to the development. And the matters here are to be considered on its own merits, and obviously members, it's up to you to reach your own conclusions, taking into account your adopted planning policies and any other material considerations that you think relevant to the planning application. And obviously we're happy to advise you on whether those are material or not to the determination of the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Kittle-Morris, please.
Yeah, Second Chairman. I wish there hadn't been an indicative plan of the layout on the drawings, because I think that's fogged the issue. I seem to remember that many years ago we were being told that we had to have 35 to 50 to the hectare. And some of the villages which are in my area would have been welcome to have 20 to 25 to the hectare in any developments put there. I think I agree with what Councillor Brame said. I think we are between a devil and a deep blue sea with this one. I can't see a reason for refusing it, and I agree with the sentiments expressed by the Dereham members and the Watton Town Council member or the Watton Town member, but I can't see any reason for refusing this particular application. So I'm going to vote for it. Thank you.
Councillor Plummer.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to get in here before Councillor Clark does. Who will be responsible for any of the open spaces or green space? Well, who will be? Thank you.
Chris.
In terms of the open space, in terms of the legal agreement, it would take a complete approach that it would be offered to ourselves as the district council, then the town council, then if those organisations don't offer to take on the open space, it would go to a management company.
Okay, thank you. No further questions from members. Then I'm going to take the vote. There's two I need. First of all, on the variation, which is 3PL 2022-1065 VAR. Your office recommendation is one of approval. Could I show of hands, please? And those against? Okay, that one's approved. Item 10B, which is 3PL 2022-1071 in outline format. Your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Could I show of hands, please? 5. And those against? Thank you. Oh, I know you enjoy that, and I'm sure you've all sorted that. Yes, I haven't voted because I do have the casting vote. And as much as I feel there have been some very important items raised, I feel this is something that can be rectified within our reserved matters at a later stage. And I think we've sent a clear message to the developer that this has certain items that need to be ironed out. And I think this will be an interesting debate when it returns. And my recommendation is this should be approved. Thank you. Thank you. We are just going to break for 10 minutes so we can have a comfort break and quick grab of tea, and we'll join back and continue at 20.